interesting that you bring that up, Jim, because, talking about the role of the vice president during former President Jimmy Carter's funeral, we were hearing the words of the late former Vice President Mondale, and talking about the reason why he accepted was because he wanted the role of the vice president to be one that was respected, one that was more equal than in years past. And it is going to be interesting to see what that dynamic is like and what role J.D. Vance will play as we continue to take a look outside of Blair House. We are expecting President-elect Trump to depart momentarily. And on the lower right-hand side of your screen, that is an aerial view from inside the Capitol Rotunda. Just a stunning view as we take a look. And previously, there were some singers. It does look like perhaps the ceremony, that portion of it has concluded as we do see people exit right there. But just sharing with our viewers the different vantage points as we continue to watch in real time the events unfold. But it is absolutely interesting to see the very beginning almost, Jim and Andrew, of what is to come in the next 4 years, setting the stage for.
If a man really hated ads, here's what he would do. Day 1, he would install Pi on his computer without spending a dime because it's 100% free. Day 2, he realizes how clean and clutter-free his browsing experience has been since he got Pi. He doesn't have to deal with annoying cookie pop-ups or targeted ads. Day 3, he can finally binge YouTube and Twitch without interruption because Pi works on every website you visit on Chrome. Day 4, he discovers that when he does see ads, he can get paid to see them. Day 5, his life has improved 1,000 times because of the peace he gets from experiencing an ad-free internet. He decides he never wants to go back to life without Pi and tells all his friends and family to download it. See how Pi can improve your life today.
Have you started your taxes only to quit when your refund didn't meet your expectations? Free Tax USA is here to help. We ask all the right questions to maximize your credits and deductions. Other tax services leave out extra questions or skip deductions to make their software seem easier. But this oversimplification comes at a cost, where you could be missing money-saving deductions and credits. At Free Tax USA, we guide you through the process, checking for all the ways to save on taxes and helping you keep more of your hard-earned money. Plus, you save even more with free federal filing and the biggest refund possible, guaranteed. So why wait? Secure your biggest refund at freetaxusa.com.
Who come rather than having them stay in the White House. There are these hilarious stories of Winston Churchill walking around, the White House in the middle of the night. And there's one very famous story of him standing up naked in a bathtub that he was in, saying the Prime Minister of England has nothing to hide from the President of the United States. It was just, it was a real annoyance to Eleanor Roosevelt. So Blair House became kind of this very famous place for distinguished guests to stay. But during Truman's time, the White House was literally falling apart. And so they went in, you ought to see some of the pictures of this. They gutted the White House during Truman's administration. And he lived across the street in Blair House during that time. So it became kind of the White House itself. Then they recreated the White House to what it is now. But it was literally, they were worried that it was going to collapse because it had been so weakened over time. And during that time when Truman was in the Blair House, there was a Puerto Rican nationalist uprising at the time. There were several of the Puerto Rican nationalists who got guns, came to Blair House to try to assassinate Truman. They got as far as the guards in front of Blair House. Truman was actually taking a nap inside. Several of the guards were killed. The nationalists were killed. It was a really traumatic incident at that time. But the Blair House goes way back. I mean, the people who stayed there and came over to see Lincoln when he was in the White House is interesting. But it really became what you talked about, Andrew, a kind of let's have our visitors stay in the Blair House as opposed to having them stay in the White House.
And as we talk about the Blair House, we are still waiting for President-elect Donald Trump to depart. But this is a live look there at the Capitol, where we were seeing his daughter, Ivanka Trump, arrive along with a number of other family members right there. This is a live look as they already are starting to trickle in inside the Capitol. You see Eric Trump right there as well, walking inside, of course, awaiting for President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance to arrive. But another historical moment in the making, Jim and Andrew, as this is really just the second time that the swearing-in ceremony is taking place inside at the Capitol Rotunda because of the weather, the incredibly cold weather. But what's also interesting to note is that there have been very cold swearing-in ceremonies that have taken place outdoor. And Jim, historically, when we're taking a look at the decision-making process when it comes to whether or not to hold an inauguration, traditionally outside or now shifting inside, what is the thought process historically when it comes to determining, the events and where they take place?
Good question. Very good question. It gives us a chance to talk about this building too a little bit. When the Capitol was built, the very first building was the Senate building, which is just to the right of the big dome right there. That was the original structure that was built. And then they began to build the middle part that will be the rotunda. The original rotunda had a cap to it that was much, much smaller than the one you see. In fact, the one you see was built during the time of Abraham Lincoln. You can see pictures of it being constructed during one of his inaugurals. So they built that, and then the house was built on the other side. And then eventually they expanded the two wings. So where the Senate is now is further out, where the House is now is further out. But so in that context, these inaugurations took place in various stages and in various places. The Senate building was originally used, as was the House chamber, for the very first presidents. The first time it went outside was Andrew Jackson, and they used the east portico, not the west. The west portico is where it's been done since Ronald Reagan switched it from the east to the west, where you look down the mall and that beautiful setting that you've shown pictures of. It always prior to that was on the east side, and the east side is where you see those famous pictures of Lincoln when he's giving his second inaugural are on the east side. What's interesting is once they built this huge dome on top of the structure, it really made the pillars that were in front of the east look very small and out of place. So there was a project to redo that, and they took those pillars down. They took that facade down. And if you're in Washington and want to have some fun, those pillars are all in the National, I think, Arboretum, standing like, if you went to Rome and saw ruins and so forth, those pillars are out there. And they were replaced by new pillars and a new facade. So the facade you see with Lincoln is not the same facade where he spoke. It became much bigger and elaborate. And each president, made a decision about whether to go forward with, the exterior inauguration. When Grant was inaugurated, I think it was for his second time, it was extremely cold. It was like, 16 degrees. And he went out, nevertheless, gave his inauguration outside, but he held his inaugural ball in a room in the Treasury building where it was so cold, people were wearing overcoats and the champagne froze. So kind of a famous time there. But, being the Civil War general that he was not going to take it back inside. He held it outside. And then, of course, with Reagan, it was important because by the time you get, to Trump and to Reagan and so forth, you have so many people who show up and who are in danger of having frostbite, or really some bad things can happen in situations in that sort of weather. So I think it was a wise choice to move it inside, just like as it was with President Reagan. But over time, it has been, JFK, it was about the same temperature that it is right now, 22 degrees. He went ahead with it outside. And I think the better idea is to hold it inside and then to not have people get injured or hurt during an inauguration.
Yeah, we're just looking at some of the arrivals yet again. Maybe we can listen to some of them here.
Jim, as we take a live look at the arrivals here inside the Capitol Rotunda, I want to ask you this, and maybe you know and maybe you don't, but we are awaiting President-elect Donald Trump to depart the Blair House and make his way here. You know, what's the process during this waiting period? What is he doing? Is he practicing his speech? Is he just relaxing? I mean, what does he do during this downtime? Or is he busy making phone calls, as we do know that, you know, he's set to sign, 200 or so executive orders? You know, can you take us perhaps inside the Blair House as we do await his arrival here?
Well, I doubt he's practiced. I bet he's read over his speech many times, and he's pretty good at reading speeches. And I think he will, he has good delivery. He knows how to give a speech. My guess is he's talking to a lot of different people and getting ready to come over. It's interesting in our history how this, presidents getting to the Capitol to be sworn in. The first inauguration was in New York at a place called Federal Hall, where Washington came all the way from Mount Vernon and rode horseback and through carriages through various cities on the way, and had all this big celebration of him coming to, to that ceremony. He gets to the ceremony. They go to give him the inauguration, and nobody had remembered to bring a Bible. They had to run and get one from a Masonic temple that he used, and that many presidents have used since because of its historic significance. He then walked over to church himself. And then when you had Thomas Jefferson, he left his hotel where he was in Washington and walked to his inaugural, the first one, and then walked back to the hotel following that inaugural. So that was kind of a important point. Later in his second inaugural, he rode a horse to Congress to be sworn in. That then followed with various presidents getting there by various means. I think the first to go in a car might have been McKinley. No, not McKinley, would have been Harding. Subsequently, this tradition developed where once the president was done with the inauguration, then you would have a parade that followed on. And those parades became more and more elaborate. Eisenhower's lasted for 4.5 hours. It was the longest. Wilson's had 40,000 people marching in it. It was the most people marching in a parade. So that became kind of the tradition of the president going back. And as you know, Carter, when he left his inauguration, was being driven back to the White House when he stopped the car, got out, and started to walk. And that became extremely famous. And I think everybody has followed that, where they walk a portion of the time on the way back to the White House. Trump did it and Biden did it. It is become kind of a tradition. It'll be interesting to see it in the cold weather, whether they'll follow that pattern or not. I wouldn't, frankly, for security and other reasons. But, this getting to there and then leaving ended up resulting in the parade that we have, because the early presidents were followed by their enthusiastic supporters back to the White House. Andrew Jackson had such enthusiastic supporters that they came back to the White House and ransacked it. I mean, they went in, punch bowls were thrown everywhere, curtains were torn down, people had to escape through windows. It was just a scene, a joyous scene, but eventually the way they got everyone out of the White House was to take these big punch bowls outside and get the people to leave the White House.
And Jim,
So
I
there's-
just wanted to pause as President-elect Donald Trump has now arrived at the White House. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcoming Trump and Melania Trump right there. I am going to raise the audio again. We might not be able to hear much, but let's listen in. And I have to say, this is really interesting as we're watching President Biden and President-elect Trump standing there, apparently seeming to have a conversation of some sorts. And it's just so interesting to see the interactions, as always, as it was a very contentious, battle almost between the two before President Biden announcing that he would step down and step away from running once again for president. But, Jim, when you take a look at that moment, we did this with J.D. Vance, of course, and Vice President Harris. But what do you make of that as they paused right where that photo opportunity was, but to apparently have some sort of conversation?
The same thing I said about the J.D. Vance moment. This is good for the country to see. The unity is good. The friendship shown between two men is good. Melania Trump looked a little uncomfortable, but that's a difficult role to be in. And when the two of them went in, it looked like they continued to talk. This is reminiscent of Obama and Trump speaking at Carter's funeral too. This is a time for people to begin treating each other as not just political enemies, but as, fellow Americans. If you look over time, that interaction can sometimes be very frosty. If you look at when FDR came in 1933 and Hoover lost, they rode together in an open car with the same blanket over them to the Capitol for the inauguration, and FDR chatted away and Hoover said nothing. He was not happy. Carter and Reagan were similar. I don't think Carter was particularly chatty. I think Reagan, being who Reagan was particularly chatty. When Warren Harding won after the First World War, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke. 19 months earlier, he had tried to pass what was called the Versailles Treaty, the League of Nations. It failed. He, trying to get it passed, Wilson went out into the country to stump for it, had this severe stroke in Denver, was taken back to the White House, had another very severe stroke. And so he was very disabled at that point. And by the time, it came time for Harding to come to the White House and to go with him, they did go over together. But once they got to the Capitol, Harding kind of excused Wilson and said, I will not blame you if you don't want to come out for the ceremony itself, because he really was disabled at that point. And so Wilson was taken to his house on S Street, which is still in existence, a great museum if you're in Washington to go see. But this transition of power, this thing that Reagan talked about in 1981 as being a miracle, it really is a miracle. And it really is interesting. If you look back at Thomas Jefferson, as I told you, there was a really severe fight between Adams and Jefferson. They would later in life become friends and would write letters to each other. They both die on the same day in 1826 on July the 4th, interestingly enough. But during that time, as I said, Adams left and Jefferson went ahead and gave his magnanimous speech So if you look at, what has happened in these transitions of power, many people called that 1801 election a revolution, because it really was the first time we saw political power handed from one party to another. It was the very beginning of parties. And so people saw that as kind of an important revolution and an important development in the American experiment in democracy. And so it has been carried out ever since. And so this scene is a good scene for Americans. And let's hope that the inaugural also continues that feeling of let's unify as a country and move forward as a country. There are a lot of things that need to be addressed in this world and in this country. And, people need to work together to have that all happen.
Jim, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. Time right now is 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. And if you are just joining us here on Live Now from Fox, we are continuing our coverage of Inauguration Day 2025. This is a live look right there outside the U.S. Capitol. As we have been sharing with you, arrivals continue inside the Capitol Rotunda. In fact, this is a live look right here of the Capitol Rotunda, as we have seen family members of President-elect Trump, as well as others, arriving here, getting ready to be seated. Meanwhile, we also want to share with our viewers as well that we were sharing with you the arrival of President-elect Donald Trump and Melania Trump here at the White House. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcoming them in for a tea ceremony prior to the swearing-in ceremony. They are inside the White House, media not allowed inside. And of course, one has to wonder what that conversation is going to be like. This is another vantage point there outside the White House. A very snowy ground, a very cold day, which is why in just the second time, the first time since 1985, the swearing-in ceremony will be held inside the Capitol Rotunda. And in fact, this is an aerial view right here. It keeps going in and out, so I didn't want to necessarily bring it to you full, but just a very brief look right here at the aerial view from inside the Capitol Rotunda right there. Just a bird's eye view, and you can see that folks are making their way inside. And this is a live look right here inside Capital One Arena, as of course it is a very chilly day. So unfortunately, the hundreds of thousands of individuals who made the journey to the U.S. Capitol to watch as history unfolds, as Donald J. Trump is sworn in as the 47th president. Unfortunately, the outside ceremony not happening, but you can already see that thousands of people are packing inside Capitol Run Arena to watch this via the screens. We also know that Trump will then, after being sworn in as president, make his way inside the arena to deliver additional remarks to those as well. And once again, I do want to bring in my colleague Andrew Kraft as we continue our live coverage here. And you can see that lawmakers, Andrew, are arriving there inside Capitol Hill as, arrivals do continue. As we continue to discuss all of this, what are your thoughts as we continue to watch this unfold? Truly historic in nature right there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're seeing the former speakers of the House there, McCarthy, Boehner, and Gingrich. So that's always interesting to see them kind of commingling together. Of course, Republican political powerhouses, all three of them really in their own right there. But I just want to go back. Our viewers were just watching that really incredible, somewhat tense scene, I think, between the Bidens and the Trumps. And you just kind of have to get into the head of Trump, into the head of Biden. These are longtime political foes. We know that they cannot stand each other. On the surface, yes, they exchanged pleasantries. They had a short conversation. They took the photo here. But the 2020 election and the 2024 election were very hard-fought contests. We know Trump did not even attend the inauguration of Joe Biden. Of course, things look a lot different this time around. And right now, as we speak, they are having tea together in the White House. And that goes to what Jim Robidault was saying, that this is what this day is about, the peaceful transition of power. You set all that aside, no matter how hard it is in your marrow and in your bones, that you might be thinking to yourself, if you're Biden or Trump or even Harris with Vance, because electoral defeats are very painful, but you put all that aside for today, one day only. And I think that's what Jim was alluding to. That's what this country is all about. That's what makes us unique. He called it, and many have called it, a miracle, so to speak. So I just wanted to note that there. Of course, we know President-elect Trump's relationship with former House Speaker McCarthy. You'll remember, Stephanie, in the wake of the January 6th Capitol attack, mere days, if not weeks afterward, Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago. And that was really seen as a game-changing moment. That was seen as a moment that was rehabilitating Trump's image in the wake of the January 6th Capitol attack, that there were going to be fellow Republicans who will still stand by him and forgive him for January 6th. So I thought that was interesting. McCarthy, of course, we know how that unfolded for him. He lost the gavel. His own fellow Republicans, 8 of them, ousting him from the speakership now a little bit over a year ago. And so he's on hand. There's going to be a lot of people on hand in the Capitol Rotunda. But that's what I'm thinking of right now. And just for our viewers, to give them up to speed on what's happening live right now, they are, the Bidens and the Trumps, having tea together at the White House before they ride together to the Capitol, to the Rotunda for the swearing in.
You know, and we're taking a live look, Andrew, of the White House right there as the tea ceremony is underway. And you know, it's always so interesting as we see, you know, the political rivalry, you know, front and center, you know, especially during the election cycle. And, you know, the ability for some, perhaps not all, but some of these politicians to then set that rivalry, that contentiousness aside, you know, and seeing beyond perhaps the political party and seeing the person instead. You know, as we take a look at the political landscape, you know, what do you make of that? Because we were seeing President-elect Trump and former President Barack Obama speaking with one another quite cordially at the funeral service of former President Jimmy Carter. Of course, you know, not everyone is able to, you know, put those politics aside after leaving office, after handing the baton, so to speak, you know, but one has to wonder what the conversation is like now inside the White House, as in just hours, President Biden, no longer president, and President-elect Trump will be sworn in as the 47th president of the United States, and for the second time.
Right. I mean, history is contingent. Elections matter. I'm sure you have. I know I have lost contests in my personal life, minor, large, grand, small, and it's tough and it hurts. But that's what this day is about. You put those aside. You let bygones be bygones for at least a couple hours.
Absolutely. And that apparently is what they are going to do. And, you know, just to give our viewers just another look right here, I did want to share this live look right here as well, as we are taking a look outside the Capitol Hill right there, outside the Capitol building. You can see buses lining up, most likely to bring in individuals into the Capitol Rotunda. And there is the aerial view. Unfortunately, it does go in and out, as, you know, we do get these live streams from time to time. But I did want to share that with you as we continue this live look right here. You know, Andrew, as we continue to take a look at this, you know, it is so interesting to see who is in attendance, who is being joined, and you can see people from really both parties attending, as well as you know, staunch supporters. In fact, you can see some of these, Marco Rubio right there, Senator Marco Rubio, likely no longer to be that, obviously, as we have heard that Governor DeSantis has named his successor. But really the who's who right there in terms of cabinet selections.
Yeah, you're seeing all of the Trump cabinet selections get off that charter bus right there, and we can name them. We know, Stephanie, the confirmation hearings are literally happening as we speak. We saw a lot of that last week. It's going to pick up this week as well. These are the people Trump has chosen to help him lead and plan the agenda for the next 4 years. And so you see them all there get off that charter bus. Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, and others there.
Absolutely. And I did also want to share this with our viewers, and actually we see some of the outgoing members as well, perhaps, as everyone is seated right here. So, we are awaiting the arrival of both President-elect Donald Trump and President Biden. They, of course, are having their pre-inauguration, ceremony as we continue to see, individuals trickle, but also, as we take a live look right here, this is historic in nature, because this is atypical, Andrew. This is not something that we traditionally see every 4 years with the swearing-in ceremony. I did want to share this with our viewers as well. As you can see, a live look there, a larger, more extensive view of the Capitol building right there, where everyone is congregating. And of course, as we have been sharing and talking about, there of course is a reason why, when it comes to the fact that the mall is completely empty. No one is in attendance. No one is allowed to congregate there because of the frigid weather. And so I did want to share that with our viewers as well. And a beautiful live look right here. From the from the rooftop, I should say, of the Washington Monument, and this really giving us a clearer picture. We see the American flag there, waving in the wind, and the wind chill making it even feel like single digits right here as we continue to await the arrival of President-elect Trump and, of course, President Biden.
Yeah, that was a really cool shot there atop the White House. If we have the inside of the rotunda, we can point out some of the people that are there. I think that would be helpful for some people watching, because to your point, Stephanie, it is going to be a who's who of the federal government. It's going to be a who's who of Washington. But world leaders are also in attendance. I believe I saw the Argentinian president, Javier Milei, and other former world leaders as well. So we'll do our best pointing out these individuals, pointing out these members of Congress, former members of Congress, incoming and outgoing members of both administrations here. That's always, to your point, interesting to see who's there and who's not, who's seated next to who and who's standing maybe. But we're finally getting a live picture inside of the rotunda. We were wondering how this was all going to look because they had to pull it together so quickly. And there you see more of these individuals walking into Congress there. And if I recognize anyone, I will definitely point them out here. Looks like Tulsi Gabbard there, Vivek Ramaswamy, other members of the incoming Trump cabinet, and some of the staffers who will work in the second Trump White House. Upon confirmation, of course, there's Elon Musk.
And Andrew,
we can see if we can hear some of the natural sound. That's always interesting, too.
It is, and we can see the inside of the rotunda as this, they continue to, weave through shots right here. But, as we take a moment to pause, I do want to bring in Rebecca Castor with Fox News as well as we continue our live coverage right here. And Rebecca, we're taking a live look from inside the Capitol Rotunda as we see lawmakers, officials, and really the who's who of Washington and the business industry, arrive ahead of this swearing swearing-in ceremony. We see the Capitol building right there behind you as we are awaiting the arrival of President-elect Donald Trump. Security, of course, top of mind. You know, thousands of law enforcement officers spreading out across Washington, D.C. to make sure that what happens is as seamless as possible, a hustle and bustle, if you will, ahead of the swearing-in ceremony. So, you know, can you set the scene for us right now?
Hey, Stephanie, good morning. So speaking with other reporters on our Fox team who have covered inaugurations here in D.C. in the past, they're saying that this security feels a lot more ramped up than previous inaugurations. So even though things have moved indoors, security is still red hot. They have the Capitol building pretty much locked down like a fortress. There are miles and miles of fencing all around the Capitol building, as well as some of the nearby streets. It's really hard to travel by car here in downtown D.C. right now. People are saying that they've been having to walk for several miles to get to some of these locations. But yesterday, thousands of police officers from across the country arrived here in D.C. They were sworn in by the local police chief, and they have been given police powers to help out the D.C. Metro Police as well as the Capitol Police as well. They're expecting at least 19 different protests to possibly happen around the district today, so we're going to be monitoring that. We know that they're going to have drones out, also monitoring events from the sky. So if anybody is here watching locally and they see drones in the air, that is likely what they are doing, monitoring some of these events. A lot of things are going to look different today than they have in the past now that this inauguration is moving inside the Capitol. It's been 40 years since a president was sworn in inside the Capitol Rotunda. Those lawmakers that are entering now to the Capitol Rotunda, that's an exclusive invitation. We're told only about 600 people are going to be able to sit inside the Capitol to be able to watch the swearing in happen in person. There's going to be an overflow room as well. So I think there was some discussion on Capitol Hill, lawmakers lobbying to try to get the best seat in the House and to actually be there in person as opposed to that overflow room. But it's just not going to be the same event as if we would have seen Donald Trump outside on the west front of the Capitol taking the oath of office. Of course, all of these changes, primary reason is the weather. This morning, the feels like temperature was about 12 degrees. The sun is up, so it's warmed up a bit now. It feels a little bit more comfortable outside, but that decision was made with the safety in mind of the hundreds of thousands of people from all over the country who traveled to D.C. and we're going to congregate on the National Mall. They've actually shut that down. People that are still here are not able to even be around the National Mall today. They've locked it down because the police just don't want people gathering because of just the safety conditions out here in the weather.
All right, Rebecca, we do appreciate you sharing that with us as we continue to follow the very latest. And we did want to once again share this live look outside the Capitol Rotunda. We saw Jeff Bezos, of course, founder, CEO of Amazon, along with his fiancee, Lauren Sanchez. And I did want to raise the audio to see what we can hear as the arrivals continue at the U.S. Capitol ahead of the swearing-in ceremony. And we see former President Bill Clinton along with Hillary Rodham Clinton also in attendance right there, you know, just posing for pictures. And we do know that, you know, all of the living presidents will be in attendance, as well as the former first ladies, everyone except for Michelle Obama, who will not be attending, not giving any particular reason why that is. She also did not attend former President Jimmy Carter's funeral as well. As we continue truly to see the who's who, we do hear some of the music right here, so we pause on the commentary and allow you to listen in.
Esther, good to see you. Good to see you, guys. Who's this guy you Your next door neighbor. We never put one bigger than
And there we have Rudy Giuliani, the former attorney for President-elect Donald Trump, of course, the former mayor there of New York City, as Rudy Giuliani now making his way inside ahead of the swearing-in ceremony for President-elect Donald Trump. We continue to see this, but I do want to pivot now because we do see here the departure there at the White House, as we do see Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff and soon to be First Lady Vice President there. And we are waiting in. I'm going to raise the audio as we are expecting President Biden and President-elect Donald J. Trump to be departing as well momentarily.
Yeah, and Stephanie, we're just watching, you just saw the second gentleman there, Doug Emhoff, with the incoming second lady, Usha Vance, there, leave the White House. We know tea is happening between the Bidens and Trumps as we speak, but we were seeing a slew of dignitaries there enter into the Capitol Rotunda, including many, many members of the House and the Senate. You also, I'm not sure if some of our viewers caught, you saw Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, there walking into the rotunda. And from what I understand, I believe he will be administering the oath of office. Trump has two Bibles that will be used to administer the oath, his mother's Bible, and then, of course, the very, very famous Lincoln Bible from 1861. That's been a hallmark. It's been a tradition for many, many inaugurations past. So just a really, really beautiful live look. Let's keep listening.
Ready, host. Ready, host.
And Stephanie, in these moments, in these parts, I have to be honest with the viewer, it is my favorite, just to see who's talking to who and who's not talking to who and who's greeting each other and who's turned their body language away from each other. It is fascinating. And almost the former speakers there right in the front, kind of unofficially acting as a greeting line for so many members there of the House. Many Republican members right there. You see Chip Roy. You see Brian Stile from Wisconsin and others there. You see Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey. Of course, Chip Roy drawing the ire of President-elect Trump during the entire government funding shutdown showdown that was averted mere weeks ago after the Christmas holiday. But it's just very, very interesting. So we are seeing this, Stephanie, of how all these people are going to fit in the Capitol Rotunda, and it is getting full. And it is getting packed, as we can see. So we're going to do our best to point out some of these notable individuals, some of these dignitaries there, gathered, invited. Now, what was so interesting, a lot of these lawmakers, they get their own kind of set of tickets where they can hand out and dole out at will to, supporters and family and friends. Well, that was kind of moot this year because it was moved inside from outside because it was so cold. So to your point, we have heard from a lot of people, people who come from all over the country to be here for Inauguration Day. Pretty disappointing. And to your point, the National Mall right now, not a soul in sight. And that is never the case on these Inauguration Days. It is teeming with thousands of people. And you see there some of the members of Congress, Mike McCall there from Texas, Marcy Kaptur from Ohio, Greg Meeks from New York, Byron Donalds from Florida there, Mike Waltz, the incoming National Security Advisor. Of course, remember, he had to resign his House seat in order to take this role. This is not a Senate-confirmed role, National Security Advisor. And you see so many others from the Texas Republican congressional delegation there.
And also, Andrew, what's interesting is, of course, obviously all of this has had to pivot from an outdoors event to an indoors one, and the reason being that it was too bitterly cold outside. And now one has to wonder, with hundreds and hundreds of people packing inside the Capitol Rotunda, how warm it's going to get inside there. They might have a very different issue when you have so many people packed shoulder to shoulder. It does get very warm, and it is going to be interesting to see, as you mentioned, the interaction between the people as we continue to see that interaction. I did want to just allow our viewers to just absorb and be part of this as we continue to raise the audio and just listen in and just take stock of this historic event. Although we do want to now pivot as we continue to see, here's a live look right here of the First Lady Jill Biden and the soon-to-be First Lady Melania.
In 2017, Trump's tax cuts helped families get ahead by putting $1,500 back in Americans' pockets. Now they're set to expire. Tell Washington now is not the time to raise taxes. Protect prosperity. Renew the TCJA.
We've always said never sell a house in the winter. That's not true.
At the RNC there in Milwaukee, she did not speak at the RNC, and so it'll be interesting to see. She did take somewhat of a back seat in the Trump first term as well. In the role of First Lady, the role of First Lady that Jill Biden took was very front and center, was very prominent. Someone would even argue that she was, because of President Biden's age or alleged infirmities or alleged senility, that she was somewhat also in charge of the inner circle, so to speak. So I thought those roles were very different.
And we
now
see the
have
doors,
the two
Andrew,
principals, I believe,
once
coming
again.
out. Maybe not?
I just wanted to let our viewers know we see the doors opening once again. That, of course, is Vice President-elect J.D. Vance alongside Vice President Harris. They, too, will be sharing a motorcade. And to your point, Andrew, you were mentioning it's going to be interesting to see what First Lady Jill Biden and Melania Trump will be speaking about. Now you have Vice President Harris and J.D. Vance sharing a vehicle. You know, is there going to be any sort of conversation, you know, as they make their way to the Capitol Rotunda? We continue to talk about the political dynamics. And, you know, it's always interesting. We see them from a distance, but truly they only know what's happening inside that vehicle, of course, alongside, you know, Secret Service. But they, too, are departing the White House. And finally, as we pivot the view right there back to the front doors, you know, we are expecting to see President-elect Trump and President Biden to depart shortly. I also wanted to share this look as we continue to take a look. You can see House Speaker Mike Johnson there arriving at the Capitol Rotunda as we do see the limousine that is set to depart the White House right here. And I did just want to pause on this live look as we are expecting President-elect Trump and President Biden to be departing the White House in just a matter of moments, also sharing a singular vehicle as they make their way to the Capitol Rotunda for this historic moment as President-elect Donald Trump is going to be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States.
And just to note, Stephanie, the woman in the green jacket, that was Senator Deb Fischer from Nebraska. There's this entire congressional committee known as the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. They are tasked with putting all this on. And so that's why you saw Senator Deb Fischer there, the Republican from Nebraska. And so they are responsible for planning this, for making sure it all goes off without a hitch. And so they are instrumental in this. You're going to see them quite a lot today. And you just saw Deb Fischer there with, I believe, Usha Vance and Doug Emhoff. So wanted just to note that there as well. You also see some of these congressional leaders get there into the rotunda. You just saw Hakeem Jeffries and others, Speaker Mike Johnson. So congressional leadership looks like they are in the building now. We are awaiting, to your point, President-elect Trump and President Biden. And to your point, I do hope that maybe some of the official photographers will release photos from inside the limousines of how these moments transpired, what the conversations were like. Maybe we can get some reporting as well. We do know, though, the Bidens have been somewhat gracious with the Trumps after the November 5th election. President Biden inviting Trump to the White House that very same week and committed to a peaceful transition of power. And that is what we are seeing today. And that is why this is so important. So Biden and Trump will be riding over in the Beast to the Capitol from the White House momentarily. This is really quite something. You know, obviously they haven't spent that much time together. They were on a debate stage twice in 2020. They were on a debate stage once in 2024. They've appeared at similar events at the same time, but I would venture to say that this is going to be the closest in proximity they have been for the longest duration, maybe ever. And so you just have to wonder what those conversations are going to be like. These political rivals, political foes, from all reporting suggests they literally cannot stand each other. And I think a lot of the viewers forget that after Biden sought not to seek re-election after the debate in June in Atlanta, where he withdrew from the ticket, the Trump campaign had a difficult time adapting and adjusting to the fact that he was not going to be the rival. It was going to be someone else, and here they are.
And as the limousine departs right there, we actually saw President-elect Trump on his cell phone, Andrew, just checking some stuff. But we were hearing one of the reporters yelling out to both Biden and Trump, "What are you going to talk about?" And obviously they did not answer. But of course, that's the question that everyone wants to know. What will these gentlemen be speaking about? They, of course, were joined by Representative Amy Klobuchar, who, is part of the committee that oversees the inauguration and all of the events. But still, curious minds want to know, Andrew, what is the conversation going to be like inside this limo? I don't know specifically, and perhaps you do, just how many minutes it's going to take for the limousine to actually arrive at the Capitol, but it could either be a very long ride or it could be a very short and comfortable ride. We don't know.
Yes, it is a very short ride, under 10 minutes. And yeah, you saw there Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, the Democrat, another member of this joint congressional committee on inaugural ceremonies. And so she's also in the limousine. Maybe she'll be breaking the ice, so to speak, between Trump and Biden. But this leads me to wonder as well, Stephanie, what is the Biden post-presidency going to look like? We know they're going to be, they being Joe and Joe Biden, they'll be spending a couple of days in Santa Barbara, California. After today, they'll be whisked off there to the West Coast. We know Trump is going to the West Coast later this week on Friday to survey some of the damage wrought by the LA wildfires. So they may be in California at the same time as well. But a post-presidency looks different, so to speak, if you're Obama and you're leaving the White House in your 50s. Biden leaving the White House in his early 80s. I wonder how he will choose to use that. He said in a speech in South Carolina just yesterday, he is going to remain engaged. He is going to remain committed. He's not going anywhere. So I think it remains to be seen what his role in American political life will be going forward. Sometimes presidents, all presidents, when they leave the White House, they go back to being everyday regular citizens. But some take up a role and they want to use their influence that they had in the Oval Office, even while not in the Oval Office. Jimmy Carter was a perfect example of that. And so you're watching the beast right now move down Pennsylvania Avenue, down to the U.S. Capitol. This is quite something. This is remarkable. Let's just watch and listen.